This is Success Stories, a program of the Sorrell College of Business at Troy University. I'm your host, Alan Mendenhall, Associate Dean of the Sorrell College of Business and Executive Director of the Manuel H. Johnson Center for Political Economy. Success Stories is a program that highlights the lives and careers of people who have accomplished great things, and Dean Eric Enlow, my guest today, is one such person. Dean Enlow is Dean of Handong International Law School in South Korea, and he's also a Vice President of Handong University. Dean Enlow, thank you for being here.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I just want to ask you about Handong. If you could talk about the law school. I think it just had its 20th anniversary, and talk about what it is, what its identity is, and how you got there.
Yeah. Well, Handong International Law School was originally a project of both vision and entrepreneurship in a way. It's a very unique school in the sense that we teach U.S. and international law in Asia. And our students are focusing on preparing for careers in international law in the sense of helping businesses to connect with trade, but also on the public international law side, dealing with human rights issues and problems that people face with governments and religious freedom and other kinds of things. And the idea really came out of the passion of the first president in two senses. One, as a Christian school, a passion to help Christians in other countries that were struggling with religious freedom and other kinds of problems. But also just the notion that we need to, as Christians, be taking the kingship of Christ into all the world. And a kind of entrepreneurial vision where he said, look, there's a real opportunity to do something that hasn't ever been done, and we should try to do it. And that's really the history of the law school. Once we tried this thing and tried this endeavor, we identified a real need, and it was real scary to do it because it hadn't been done. But once we did it, everybody looked around and said, hey, this is great. And in the last 20 years, our school went obviously from nothing to being an important part of a particular niche of the international legal education system in Asia. So it's been exciting.
And the school has had long-standing ties to Alabama. You've sent interns here, you have relationships here. How did that begin? Well,
the Korean diaspora, the Korean corporations, of course, came to Alabama with Kia and different things, and the people in Alabama, I think, in part because they recognized the importance of the ties that we can make when we open up in some ways to other countries and other places, welcomed our students in. One of the neat things I see, because I travel around Asia a great deal, is there really is, across all countries and all cultures, a respect for the project of justice, the project of preparing people in principled ways to be advocates for others, to give advice to others. And when you come and explain what your mission is in those terms, people get it. And whether it's in going to a communist, still very communist country like Laos, or going to a country like China or Mongolia, that project, that sense that all people share, that we need justice, and that schools that want to prepare people for that and bring the world together in that pursuit, whatever other problems we have, it's a message that works. It's sort of one of the basic ways in which I see the idea of natural law showing itself, that God has put something in every heart that's universal. If you learn how to speak to that, you get a reception.
And your curriculum includes American law, correct?
Yeah, so our program is we follow exactly a U.S. legal curriculum, except at the end of it, we're really preparing people in what would usually be your elective classes. It really is all going to international trade, international business, or to international human rights issues like religious freedom. A lot of our students, there's a lot of concern for the situation of children in Asia. There's been a lot of problems with that. And so there is a great international movement of people who are looking at situations in different countries and saying, look, how can we help deal with some of these problems? How can we a very basic thing we do is, I've done this, many of our faculty have done this, you go to another country and go, hey, you know, this other country did this, and this helped with the exploitation of children sexually in this country. Maybe you should take a look at this. And you know what? People don't want their kids to be exploited. And if you work for that and you help share the data, share information on that, there's an incredible amount of good you can do, not at the level of you know, sort of coercive, you know, imperial brute force, but of sharing knowledge, sharing argument, sharing a passion for these things to other countries.
And how long have you been dean now?
I've been dean for 13 years.
13 years, wow. So I believe I first met you probably about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And you were visiting the Alabama Supreme Court. What do you see as sort of the primary goal of your deanship? What is your sort of missional purpose?
Yeah. I think of the leadership that we provide in my administration is focused really on the character of the school first, which is we're a Christian school. And the fundamental question that I have to keep before our faculty and our students at all times is, how is what we're doing giving glory to God? How are we obeying God? And we have a great example in Jesus Christ of what it means to love God and love our neighbor. And we want to make sure that the passion to do that is carried out in all things. And lawyers, I mean, at a basic level, we're focused on arguing, we're focused on counseling. And there are really important ways that you can understand the passion that an advocate has to bring from the example of Jesus Christ. The way in which counseling has to be done, not only to sort of fulfill your charge, but also to serve the person that you're giving legal counsel to. The way that to be a good lawyer, you have to be a good person. And so in everything, there's a very subtle problem that we have, which is there are very clear objective standards. You know, we need our students to master a set of material. It's objective, there's a global standard for it, we've got to do it. But you can't make that the enemy of the passion to become a Christ-like person, or to put it more broadly, in everything that we do as people, there needs to be this power, this passion that transforms what you're doing according to a divine order which gets beyond the things that corrupt us and bring us down. So the hardest and the most central thing is keeping our focus on that, and that's in recruiting students. I just have to tell students that vision and make sure that's why they want to come to the school. And recruiting faculty, that's why you have to do it. And that's transformed our institution, I think, in really positive ways. And I should mention the staff, too. We want everybody in the school focused on that powerful vision. And it changes things. Because I can tell students, look, you begin this life in Christ as a lawyer now. The way you treat students and the way you treat faculty and the way you treat staff, in the energy you put into your studies. As a faculty and staff, we gather together around that vision, wanting to glorify God, and it creates a different kind of institution. And it's an institution people love to be in, so they stay a long time. Because what people want to be doing in life, in my humble estimation, of course, you need to take care of your family, you need to earn a living, but what people want is that great project of love, of justice, of knowing the divine. So that's the big deal. And then, of course, a lot of the other things we have to do is, you know, there's the relentless building and construction of ever higher levels of standards of excellence in instruction and in the day-to-day activities that you're doing. And that presents a kind of pleasant tension, because I think it was Cicero who said, you know, the basic problem of prudential judgment is how you maintain the highest standards of honor and the highest standards of practicality. And people typically want to take them one way or another. They want to say we need to sacrifice everything for honor, or we need to sacrifice everything for practicality. And Cicero said, I think quite rightly, the whole reason for the orator, for the person who's helping in deliberations, the whole reason why he's a great person is if he can hold those things together. If he can show people the practicality of honor and the honor of practicality in the way that serves both together.
You grew up in Missouri. Surely you did not envision life in South Korea when you were a young child. Tell me about your childhood and your story up until college. You went to Yale University, so but tell us sort of a little bit about growing up before the college experience.
Yeah, I'm a Missouri patriot, you might say. I love Missouri. And I went away to the East Coast, Yale University, for school, and I was appalled. I hated it. Very different culture than the culture I grew up with. Very smart people, but people who have cut themselves off from what I think is the real fabric that has made America great. The real theological traditions. Yale was founded as this sort of marginal, extreme religious school. And of course, like a lot of higher education, it's drifted from that. Anyway, I met my wife in high school in Missouri. She went to school on the East Coast too, and our basic reaction was, we want to go back to Missouri, raise a family, live with our people there. We realize how important the place that we have at home is, and we want to enrich that culture. And I think we were right to have that view. But a really important part of my life was as I was seeking to do all those things and growing in my faith in Christ and learning more about how I could help and how I couldn't, I received a really strong calling from God. And it's hard to explain, it's a long story, but I felt like God made it clear to me that this call that we got from Korea, I was involved in some Christian organizations, and they were founding this new law school, international law school, and my practice was in international intellectual property law. And so they saw the international on my name, and I was involved in the Christian Legal Society, and they got a hold of me. And I thought it was a project that was wholly alien to what I'd wanted, which was to sort of go back home, to be in my community. It was the exact opposite of any of my plans. And God really had to do some heavy pounding to get me off of that. But I've come to see over the years how much of a natural extension of that was the way in which God had used that first part of my life to prepare me to do something radically different, and being open to that was incredibly important. So I guess my life thus far has been a real example of the ways in which we need to be open for that kind of transformation. And I don't think it would have worked if I had done it for my personal, because it was going to be a job where I made a lot more money or this kind of thing. It worked because for all those years I'd been really thinking hard about how to serve people, about how to strengthen my family, about what it was God wanted me to do. And so when God wanted to present me with what I think is really the great project of my life, which is to go and support this international law school, which is the only Christian international law school in Asia, the only Christian law school in Asia, which has been able, I think, in certain ways to transform some of the legal communities in Asia. I just wouldn't have been ready for that if I hadn't been trying to grow into my roots. I wouldn't have been able to hear that call from God and go and do these things. And there's a mystery in that and all sorts of things, but I guess the broad lesson I would take from my experience is, grow deep roots where you are, and what you'll find at some point is that you're pointed in ways that you don't expect to go, and to be ready for that.
After 20 plus years in Korea, do you now feel that it is your home? You probably feel that Missouri is always going to be your home, but do you feel at home in Korea as well.
Yeah, one of the, it's almost put ironically in the Christian scriptures, is that as you grow and develop, you should feel less and less at home anywhere, because you should feel more and more that your home is with God and within the heavenly kingdom. And you can read those words, and it's hard to fathom. It certainly doesn't mean that everybody needs to move to Korea. It doesn't mean that everybody in the world needs to flip-flop spaces with other people. But it does mean that everybody has to develop a way of being where you are, which is also a way of life with God. And that's going to look differently for different people. The advantage of moving to another country is it forces upon you a sense of distance from the world. It is what the metaphor, so to speak, in what the scriptures teach, that we all need to be less at home in the world and more at home in heaven, is forced upon you in a literal kind of way. And it makes you see certain ways that you're too attached to things, that you've become too at home in the world. And it's painful. And I think everybody who's moved away from home has some sense of that pain. But it can also be part of a really important spiritual process. So I love Korea. I love Missouri. In one sense, I feel more at home in both of them. I'm home for a vacation right now. I'm so happy to be back in visiting in St. Louis, Missouri, where I'm from before I came down here. But also I'm more at home at both places and less at home at both places, because all of us want to find a way in their life of aiming and serving at God. When you find that, you're more at home and you're less at home. And that's a certain peace that I guess I've found with the situation.
What are some of the chief differences in the way business is done in Korea versus in the United States? Maybe just cultural distinctions, and what elements of Korean culture might be sort of beneficial for Americans to take a look at?
I mean, on the big levels, the relationship between government and business is much, much tighter in Korea than in the United States. Particularly through its developmental phases, business was really managed in partnership with the government. There was much, much more leadership. That's been starting to change somewhat, but there's still in societies like Korea, which are fairly homogenous, there's a lot more direct kind of cooperation between the government. That makes it harder. I mean, everybody should just be aware of that, because if you're doing business with Korea, you're doing business with a kind of group, more of a group that is different than the way business is done in the United States. I think seeing how business is done in Asia makes you aware of the real problems for long-term penetration and cooperation in those markets, because they really are different. On the whole, I think the Korean society is a wonderful society, very moral society, a society that organizes itself around respect, very respectful treatment of people. It's a society where the moral spirit of the people permeates the institutions. And in my experience, this wasn't in business so much as in law firms, we've lost some of that. Not that people were unethical. I think American lawyers are very ethical, but they weren't animated by this sense of commonality and togetherness and project. And that can be a downside. And this is a well-known problem. If you're working around these ideas of respect and group characteristics, it puts some pressure on individuals to conform in different ways that can be problematic. As Aristotle would say, we're probably looking for a mean. We're probably looking for something that is a mean between the extremes, and having some familiarity with the way that a modern economy can be managed and run consistently with a stronger sense of the unity of society, without sacrificing many of the advantages that you have from individuality and individual rights and expression. That's a really important experience.
If we walk out the doors to this building, we're on the Montgomery campus of Troy University. There are four campuses throughout the state, but there are a lot of young people walking around outside right now who may not know what it is that they want to do with their lives. You've already imparted so much wisdom during this interview, but I wonder what you would say to those students about a sense of calling. You mentioned that you felt a sense of calling about going to Korea and about becoming a faculty member. You had no idea at the time that you would become dean of the law school. But what would you say to those students who are sort of unsure about the future and what they want to do for a living and how to make meaning out of their lives?
I think you find your calling in life by wherever you are right now, pursuing excellence in what you're doing, and realizing that there are so many levels of excellence. Excellence will always draw you up to a higher level, and it's by following those different levels, by becoming great at what you're doing right now, and then seeing what next step takes you to. And the way in which you are led into a strong sense of calling in life is not by being 15 and saying, I want to be an aerospace engineer. The way you're led into a calling is when you're 15 playing baseball really hard, or playing chess really hard, or playing golf really hard, by studying grammar, history, English. And those things will draw you into the next stage of excellence. If you're a person who says, I don't have a calling, how much are you studying in your history class? How much are you studying in your English class? How much passion are you giving to the things that are before you? Give passion to those things, and they'll lead you to the next thing. And where it leads you, at least in my case, is totally unpredictable. When I was in law school, I didn't like international law. I didn't like intellectual property law. I became an international intellectual property lawyer. When I was working as an attorney, I wanted to live in St. Louis, Missouri. I live in Pohang, Korea. At each stage, what marked the difference was finding something that I could do and doing it with all my passion. Christians say, work at what you're doing, but work as if you're working for the Lord. And that's, if you want guidance, if you want divine guidance, if you want a sense of divine direction in your life, you've got to be working up to God. You've got to be doing everything you're doing for the Lord. And when you do that, and you keep pushing yourself, you find transformations in what you're doing. And this is a very old way of putting it, is we come from God, and we are drawn back to God. And God draws us back to Him by various kinds of excellences, by various kinds of goods. And that's how without going on too long, that's how I'd say you find your sense of calling.
Well, there's a lesson in your story about thinking you know what you want for your life, and then getting something that is different from what you wanted, but discovering that it is possibly even better than what you wanted.
Absolutely. And yet, going through that process, like thinking about what it was, why we liked Missouri better than Connecticut, was a really important part of preparing us to move to Korea. Really being passionate about working for the good of our hometown and state was what made it possible for us to want to work well for the good of the legal community in Asia. And ultimately, a lot of what we mean by having a sense of calling is just as you move up in your sense of what motivates you, when you get to a point where you say, yeah, what I'm doing right now is motivated by my best understanding of what is good, of what is right, of what is divine. That's what it means to have a sense that, hey, I'm doing what I'm called to do. When I get up in the morning, what I work on is something in which I can express all of my passion for what is good and right and just and pure and honorable. That's what you want. Well, how do you get there? You've got to work for those things in whatever you're doing, and find the opportunities to do them. You can do that. And this is where that union of practicality and honor that Cicero was talking about comes together. Turns out, man is beautifully made in that when he is pursuing with all of his heart the good of his neighbor, giving honor to God, he works really well. It's a really practical way to work. Life is a joy. And again, how do you get there? Whatever you're doing right now, do it with all of your heart as for the Lord.
Well, I certainly feel blessed by your friendship, and I look forward to
Likewise.
your annual visits and our dinners. I've enjoyed cultivating a friendship with you over the years, and I really appreciate your time and coming on the show with us today. Folks, this has been an episode of Success Stories. Our guest today was Dean Eric Enlow. He's Dean of Handong International Law School in South Korea and also Vice President of Handong University. Dean Enlow, thank you very much. I wish you safe travels home.
Thank you. Been a pleasure.